Before we start, let me ask you something, brother. Have you ever noticed how some dating conversations feel rigged before you even open your mouth? Like the rules are already written, your motives are assumed, and no matter how carefully you speak, you're still cast as the bad guy. This is one of those conversations, and that's exactly why we're having it. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Marcus. This is the Unfiltered Guy, a place where we speak man to man about relationships, self respect, and how to move through the modern world with clarity instead of confusion. No theory for theory's sake, no feel good slogans, no moral theater, just practical psychology you can use in real life so you can make clean decisions and live with them. Now, listen, what you're about to hear isn't the kind of thing you'll see discussed honestly in most spaces. Because the moment someone brings it up, emotions spike, labels get thrown, and the entire conversation gets dragged into performance. People stop thinking, they start posturing, and the truth gets buried. So we're going to do this calmly, like adults, cleanly, with structure, with respect. Let's start where a lot of men now start, the swipe. You swipe right on someone who seems perfect, funny, smart, same interests, good energy. Then you read the bio, proud mom of one, and you pause, not because you hate her, not because you think she's less than, not because you're unkind, but because something inside you hesitates. And you tell yourself it's not about the kid. You try to be fair. You try to be modern. You try to be the guy who doesn't judge. But you know better because you've seen it before. You've seen the phone buzz mid-date. You've seen her check the time like she's already late for a shift she didn't sign up for. You've seen the moment where the evening stops being about connection and becomes about coordination. Babysitter updates, custody, adjustments, a school message, a pediatrician reminder, a sudden change in tone that has nothing to do with you, but you still have to absorb it. And you're not angry. You're just tired. Tired of being an option. Tired of being scheduled. Tired of feeling like you're auditioning for access. Here's the hard truth that men rarely say out loud. Most men aren't rejecting the mother as a human being. They're reacting to the structure around her. Because structure is what determines your day-to-day reality. Structure is what determines whether love feels like peace or like pressure. And this matters because men today are being asked to do more in relationships, with fewer guarantees, fewer supports, and fewer guardrails. Meanwhile, a lot of men are still building their own stability, still climbing, still trying to get solid on their feet. And when you're still climbing, you don't have endless surplus to carry someone else's ladder. That isn't cruelty. That's self-preservation. Now, I want to go deeper than the swipe, because the swipe is just the surface of what men feel, but don't know how to explain. A few weeks ago, I got an email from a viewer. I'm not going to read it word for word, but I will tell you the story because it captures what a lot of men experience and almost no one lets them say without punishment. The email started like this. Marcus, I don't hate single mothers. I tried to be the guy everyone says men should be. I went in with good intentions, and I walked away feeling like something was wrong with me. I need to understand why. He was 35, solid career, no kids, never married. Met a woman through mutual friends. She had two children, 8 and 11, with two different fathers. He went in telling himself what most decent men tell themselves. Be open-minded, be mature, don't judge her for her past, be the bigger man. He didn't want to be that guy. The guy who refuses. The guy people criticize. He wanted to do it right. For the first few months, things were fine. No chaos. No screaming, no blow-ups. But around month 4, something started to feel heavy. Not because she was a bad woman. Not because the kids were awful. Not because anyone committed some unforgivable act. It was heavy in a quieter way. Like he was carrying weight that didn't belong to him, and nobody acknowledged it. Like he was expected to adjust, adapt, sacrifice, and absorb without ever naming the cost. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. When men evaluate a relationship, they're not running a moral checklist. They're not primarily asking, is she a good person? That matters, sure. But it's rarely the first filter. The first filter is older than culture. It's primitive, silent, and ruthless. A man is doing an internal cost benefit scan, and it happens fast, sometimes in minutes, sometimes before the first date ends. On one side is what he's bringing: time, attention, protection, leadership, emotional bandwidth, money, planning, commitment, and the long term willingness to build a future. On the other side is what he's getting back not in fantasy, but in reality. And with single mothers, that equation often starts off tilted on day one. Let me be precise so nobody twists this. This is not a statement about moral worth. This is not a declaration that single mothers are bad. Many are strong, hardworking, resilient women who love their children deeply and are doing their best in circumstances they didn't want. This conversation is about structure, dynamics, outcomes, incentives, the friction points that don't disappear because you have good intentions. When a man dates a woman without children, his investment typically compounds toward the relationship itself. Every dinner, every long conversation, every trip, every plan, every sacrifice, it builds us. It builds shared history. It builds a future that belongs to both people. When a man dates a single mother, a portion of his investment is immediately rooted. Not later. Immediately. It goes toward children that are not his, toward a schedule he didn't design, toward a life system that was formed before he arrived, toward priorities where no matter how loved he is, he will not be first. And the viewer said something that stayed with me. He wrote, "I felt like I was donating parts of my life instead of building one." Think about that line. Donating, not building. Plans had to bend around school calendars. Dates depended on babysitters. Conversations were constantly interrupted. Every attempt at romance had contingency clauses attached. He understood it logically. Of course, the kids come first. He respected that. He didn't want to compete with children. He didn't want to be selfish. He didn't want to be immature. But emotionally, it started grinding him down. And the reason men get confused is because there's rarely one single event that screams, "Leave now." It's cumulative. It's pattern-based. It's the slow recognition that this isn't a temporary obstacle you push through. This is the shape of the relationship. He told me about one Friday night. He made reservations, showered, changed, actually felt excited, which he admitted was rare for him. 30 minutes before he was about to leave, she texted, "One of the kids isn't feeling well. Babysitter canceled. Rain check." He responded with understanding. What else could he do? But then he sat on the edge of his bed, dressed up with nowhere to go, and felt something inside him fade. Not rage, not hatred, not resentment yet, just enthusiasm leaking out. The kind of quiet disappointment that doesn't make noise, but leaves damage. And here's what men don't get told. If you repeatedly train your mind that hope leads to cancellation, your mind stops hoping. You don't decide it with a speech. You don't announce it. You just stop looking forward to things. You stop planning. You stop dreaming. You start living in a smaller emotional box because it hurts less. Now let's add the part that hits men in the chest even when they try to be above it. The fathers. Phone calls, drop offs, pickups, group texts, scheduling negotiations, emergency decisions, last minute changes, the constant background noise of another man who is structurally connected to the woman you're trying to bond with. He said, I knew logically they would always be around. I just didn't realize how small it would make me feel. And brother, here's the truth that people hate to say out loud. When kids are involved, the ex isn't really an ex. He's a permanent stakeholder. He's tied to her life through the children, even if he's irresponsible, even if he's inconsistent, even if she can't stand him. He's still a built-in part of the structure. And the new man is entering a system where the major roles are already assigned. That's when the viewer said the resentment started to scare him. Not because he hated her, but because he didn't like who he was becoming. Quiet, self-censoring, always accommodating, always understanding, always second. And the worst part was the guilt. He felt guilty for even noticing it, like wanting to matter was selfish. That is what no one prepares men for. Not shouting matches, not stereotypes, not wild drama, but the slow realization that you are offering full commitment to a situation that cannot fully choose you back. Now let's step back and name what's happening without insults and without shame. Single motherhood is not just a relationship detail. It's a life system. It's an ecosystem built around a child, held together by routines, obligations, and stress management. And in a lot of cases, that system has very little margin, very little slack, very little room. Which means when you enter it as a man, you're not just dating a person, you're dating a calendar. You're dating a custody arrangement. You're dating a financial reality. You're dating a fatigue level. You're dating a history. That's the silent contract nobody reads out loud. You don't just date her. You inherit her schedule. You inherit her stress. You inherit the ghost of her ex. You inherit the consequences of choices you didn't make. Most men aren't prepared for that. They signed up for late night talks and weekend getaways, not for becoming the emergency contact in a crisis they didn't create. And that's not because men are evil or shallow. It's because emotional labor is finite. Mental bandwidth is finite. Time is finite. And a lot of men are not trained to be unpaid therapists, part-time stepfathers, and full-time providers all at once. Here's what makes this harder. Men don't resent the child. They resent invisibility. They don't mind sacrifice. They mind being treated like an afterthought. They want to hold her, hand in a movie, not stand at the edge of a playground while she cheers from the bleachers and you're just there. They want to be included, not tolerated. And here's the quiet truth most men won't say. Men aren't afraid of kids. They're afraid of never moving past the role of visitor. Because the moment you say, I love you, it's no longer just about you and her. It's about bedtime stories you didn't earn, school plays you didn't sign up for, holidays you didn't request, and a child's loyalty that you can't demand and shouldn't expect. You can love the mother. You can even love the child, but you can't control what happens if the relationship ends. And that's where the real fear lives. Because if things fall apart, you don't just lose her. You lose the kid too. And you may lose them in a way that gives you no closure and no rights. Now, the email continued, and this part hit even harder. He wrote, I understood the rules. I just didn't understand the cost of following them. Because from day one, any man dating a single mother understands intellectually that the children come first. That's parenting. That's not a debate. Most men nod, and say the right things. They tell themselves it's noble, it's mature, it's what real men do. But psychology does not care about what sounds noble. Men are wired to want to be chosen fully, not as a convenience, not as a backup, not on a rotating schedule, not conditionally. When that desire is chronically unmet, something inside him starts to crack. The viewer described it as living with low-grade tension, not loud enough to justify leaving immediately, not small enough to ignore, just always present. Date nights felt like borrowed time. Everything felt contingent. If the kids are okay, if the ex doesn't change plans, if work doesn't run late, if no one gets sick, if the babysitter doesn't cancel. Nothing was solid. Nothing was sacred. He tried to plan a weekend getaway. Nothing crazy. One night away. A short drive. Something simple. It took weeks. Custody schedules. Negotiating swaps. Confirming childcare. Aligning calendars. Coordinating everything like he was planning a corporate merger. And when it finally seemed locked in, the ex changed his mind. The plan collapsed. She apologized. She was frustrated too. And that matters because this isn't always about a woman being malicious. A lot of single mothers are not plotting against you. They're operating inside constraints, but the outcome doesn't change. The trip died. Again. And slowly he stopped planning anything. Not as a dramatic decision, he just stopped imagining, because imagining had become a setup for disappointment. This is a psychological tax. Men are often expected to bring boyfriend-level commitment into a situation where they receive part-time access, fragmented attention, and a relationship that sits behind parental duty. And then, they're told they should be grateful for whatever time is available. He wrote another line that deserves to be repeated. I felt like I was living family life without family status. That's the core. Responsibilities without authority. Commitment without priority. Investment without security. Now let's talk about a layer. A lot of men feel, but can't say without being attacked. Perception. Men worry about being judged by her ex, by her family, by her social circle, by other parents at school. They worry that no matter how decent they are, they will always be treated like a guest in a family rather than a builder of one. They worry they will become collateral damage in a system where the man is expected to provide stability but is not granted stable standing. And that leads to the pressure point most men never admit. You're being asked to carry responsibility without consent, not because she's evil, because she's exhausted, because her life has no empty spaces, because she's been in survival mode so long that survival feels normal. And if you're a man trying to build your own life, survival mode love can feel like drowning. Now let's talk about money, because pretending money doesn't matter is how men get trapped. You order wine, she orders water, not as a statement, not as a virtue signal, because her budget is tight, because childcare, housing, and basic expenses eat everything, because she can't afford to relax the way you can. Then you notice the hesitation when the check comes. The, I'll get it next time. That sounds like a promise she isn't sure she can keep. And this is where a lot of men experience the silent contract again. If you care, you help. If you don't help, you're selfish. If you hesitate, you're not serious. You didn't sign up to be a paycheck. You signed up to laugh over tacos. But when romance starts feeling like a financial audit, attraction doesn't necessarily die. It gets buried under reality. Men don't hate that a woman is struggling. They hate being forced into a role they didn't agree to. They hate feeling like love automatically comes with debt absorption. And the truth is, many men aren't rich. Many men are still climbing too. They have student loans. They have rent. They have responsibilities. Their savings aren't deep. Their stability is still being built. So when they feel pressure to carry someone else's load, it triggers something very basic: fear of being trapped. Not because she's unworthy, because the math is real. Now add the emotional side that few men know how to describe: unresolved trauma. She doesn't talk about him anymore, but you hear him anyway, in the way she flinches when a man raises his voice, in the silence after a text pings too late, in the way she wants to move fast, then freezes when things get real. It's not always that she's holding on, it's that she hasn't had space to let go. And here's what many men discover too late: you're not the one she's trying to love, you're the one she's trying not to hurt. She may not be asking you to fix her. She might not even be aware she's doing it. But if she hasn't processed her past, you become the place where the unprocessed energy lands. Men don't mind a woman having a past. They mind becoming the dump site for it. They can listen. They can hold space. They can be patient. But when the relationship never moves beyond repair mode, doubt sets in. Not because men are shallow, because emotional labor is finite, and most men aren't trained to be a trauma sponge. And here's what no one says clearly: presence without boundaries becomes responsibility without consent. He didn't sign up to rebuild her life. He signed up to build one with her. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Marcus, but isn't this just part of adulthood? Isn't this what mature people do? Here's where we stop letting culture gaslight you. Maturity is not accepting any deal you're offered. Maturity is selecting a deal you can live with long term. And that brings us to the part people avoid, because it doesn't negotiate time and irreversible trade-offs. The viewer admitted something most men won't say, even to themselves. I kept telling myself love would override everything, but my body didn't get the memo. Men are wired to build, invest, and carry a legacy forward. Call it lineage, call it legacy, call it continuity. You can debate language, but you can't debate the impulse. And if you ignore it long enough, it doesn't disappear. It returns as regret. When a man dates a single mother, especially one with multiple children, he isn't just choosing a relationship. He is choosing a future with constraints baked in. Constraints on time, constraints on energy, constraints on finances, and often constraints on his opportunity to have biological children. His own family built from the ground up. This doesn't get talked about honestly because men get shamed for even thinking it. They're told love should be enough. They're told wanting children of your own is ego. They're told stepping into someone else's family is the real test of manhood. But here's what actually happens. Another man wrote in later, early 40s. He'd been with a single mother for years, loved her, cared for the kids, showed up, provided, supported. Every year he told himself, next year we'll talk about having one of our own. And every year something got in the way. Money, stress, exhaustion. The kids needed more. The timing wasn't right. Then one morning he realized something brutal. His window was closing. Not metaphorically, practically, real life. And he said, I didn't lose it all at once. I lost it slowly. That's the trap. There's rarely a single moment where you sign away your future. You just keep postponing it. And one day, the postponement becomes permanent. Now let's name another fear men feel but don't want to admit. It's not just jealousy of the kid. It's jealousy of the life she already lived without you. You're entering the middle, not the beginning. Parenthood isn't just an event. It's a shared origin story. It's the we built this together foundation. And when she already has a child, a man may feel like he's arriving as after the most defining chapter has already been written. Not because he wants ownership, because he wants shared meaning. And that longing isn't wrong. It's human. Now we need to address the thing that destroys a lot of good men, the step parent trap. This is where men get crushed, not by malice, but by the rules of the role. You're expected to act like a father, but reminded you're not one. You're expected to contribute, but you don't have authority. You're expected to be consistent, but you don't have legal rights. You're expected to invest, but you have no protection if the relationship ends. Men know this. They hear the stories. They see it in families. They see the man who did everything right, then gets erased when the relationship ends. No closure, no voice, no access. And here's the part that makes a lot of men quietly withdraw before it even gets serious. Love isn't enough when your heart is on the line for someone who doesn't owe you a single thing. That's not an insult to the child. It's a statement about reality. You can pay for braces. You can sit through school plays. You can teach a kid to tie his shoes. But you cannot control whether you will be treated like family or like a temporary helper. And men aren't afraid of kids. They're afraid of becoming the backup plan in a story they didn't write. Now let's bring everything together. Not ideology, not talking points, but lived reality. At some point, every man in this situation runs the full calculation. Not emotionally, practically. What he gives, what he receives, what he postpones, what he risks, what he quietly surrenders. And then the fog clears. The man from the original email wrote one final line that said more than 1,000 comments ever could. I didn't leave because I couldn't handle responsibility. I left because responsibility without reciprocity is self-betrayal. That's the part people refuse to acknowledge. Most men don't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to abandon a woman and her kids. What actually happens is slower and quieter. It starts with optimism. He tells himself this will be different. He tells himself he's mature enough now, grounded enough, strong enough to handle complexity. She believes she's finally found one of the good ones, a man who sees beyond her circumstances, a man who won't judge her, a man who will step up. They both mean well, so he adapts, he accommodates, he reschedules, he waits, he absorbs disappointment without complaint. He puts his needs last and tells himself, this is what grown men do. 6 months in, cracks appear. A year in, resentment whispers. 2 years in, it's no longer whispering. It's a question he can't silence. When do I get to matter? He looks around. He sees his friends building families from scratch. He sees relationships where effort is matched, not rationed. He sees women making space for a man, not squeezing him into the leftovers. And for the first time, he lets himself imagine a different life. Then comes the breaking moment. Sometimes it's small, another canceled plan, another night, waiting, another reminder that obligation will always outrank him. Sometimes it's big, the day he finally needs her, and she still can't show up, not because she doesn't care, but because her life simply doesn't allow it. And in that moment, something fundamental shifts. He realizes he has been auditioning for a role in someone else's story instead of writing his own, so he leaves. And this is where the narrative flips. From her perspective, it feels like betrayal. Her friends may frame it as he wasn't strong enough. The internet turns it into a morality play about men who won't step up. But that's not what happened. What happened is he stopped accepting a deal where he gives fully and receives partially. He stopped confusing self-erasure with virtue. He chose self-respect over silent resentment. Now, I want to say something that's fair to everyone involved. This isn't about hatred. This isn't about mockery. This isn't about punishing women for motherhood. It's about honesty in a system that demands silence. Because here's the real enemy a lot of the time. Not the mom, not the man, but the lack of infrastructure. We built a culture that romanticizes motherhood while stripping away communal support. We tell women to be strong and then leave them carrying everything. We tell men to be safe and then shame them for having boundaries. The overlap becomes a minefield. A single mother isn't broken. She's often exhausted, and men, especially men in their late 20s through mid 30s, are trained by experience to look for peace, reciprocity, and a partner who can match their energy, not absorb it. When that isn't available, they pull away. Not because they're cold, because they don't want to disappear inside someone else's survival story. So if you're a man wondering why you keep hesitating, ask yourself the honest question: are you afraid of her child? Or are you afraid of a world that asks you to love without giving you the tools to do it right? Are you avoiding her? Or are you avoiding a role with high responsibility and low protection? Are you running from love? Or are you running from a structure that makes love feel like management? And if you're a man currently dating a single mother, this isn't telling you what to do. It's telling you what to measure. Are you willing to be structurally second, not as an insult, but as a fact of the role? Are you prepared for your plans to be conditional? Are you comfortable with another man being permanently connected to your woman's life? Are you willing to invest emotionally in children you may lose access to overnight if the relationship ends? Are you willing to contribute without authority and without legal protection? Are you okay with the possibility that your own goals, marriage timing, children, relocation, career moves may be slowed or sacrificed? And the most important question, is she offering enough peace, appreciation, respect, and partnership to justify the added complexity? Because that's where this becomes real. If she's exceptionally mature, exceptionally cooperative, exceptionally appreciative, and she creates real space for you, protects the relationship from unnecessary interference, communicates clearly, respects your boundaries, honors your position, then yes, it can work. But if she's chaotic, resentful, still emotionally entangled with the past, using guilt as a weapon, expecting you to prove yourself endlessly, then your sacrifice will not transform the structure. Your patience will not change the math. And I'll say it even sharper. A man's compassion does not obligate him to accept a bad deal. A man can empathize with someone's hardship and still decide it is not his responsibility to absorb it. That is not hatred, that is discernment. Now, I also want to speak directly to the mothers who might hear this. Your worth is not measured by how many men stay. Your value is not a vote count. Your dignity is not determined by male approval. You've carried more than most people understand. You've shown up on low sleep. You've made hard choices. You've kept a child alive, safe, and loved in a world that makes that harder than it should be. But hear me clearly, you do not need every man. You need the man who can meet your reality without resentment. The man who doesn't come to save you. The man who doesn't see your life as a burden. The man who understands that love is not ownership, it's presence. And that kind of man exists, but he is rare. Not because men are evil, but because this role is demanding. So the solution isn't to shame men into it. The solution is honesty, boundaries, and alignment. Now, to the men who have lived through this blended families, divorce, being the stepfather, being the provider, being the one who stayed too long, I want to speak to you. What you went through wasn't pointless. But it only becomes valuable if you turn it into wisdom instead of bitterness. Right now, there are younger men listening who are standing exactly where you once stood, confused, second guessing themselves, feeling guilty for instincts they don't yet understand. They don't need slogans. They don't need shame. They don't need motivational noise. They need truth from men who already paid the price. So if you learned something the hard way, something you wish someone had told you 10 or 20 years ago, share it in the comments. You don't need to write an essay. One honest paragraph is enough. One clear lesson can change another man's trajectory. This isn't about complaining. It's about responsibility. Making sure the cost you paid doesn't have to be paid again by someone else. And if conversations like this matter to you, subscribe and join a growing community of men who value self-respect, clarity, and long-term thinking over guilt and social pressure. This isn't a channel for outrage. It's a place for men who are done lying to themselves. If you're not sure what to write, start your comment with 3 words. What I learned,